What's up, y'all? I wanted to do this video because in my last video I was about to talk about Africans versus African Americans, or Native Africans versus African Americans, because in my last video I mentioned how there was this ongoing debate on whether the Shikis there has been this ongoing debate on whether the Shikis on African Americans is appropriation or not. And as I said in my last video, it's not. The Shikis have been around since the Civil Rights Movement, the 1960s Black is Beautiful movement. And those who are saying that the Shikis are appropriation do not know shit. They are ignorant. It's just their way to be ethnocentric and anti-Black towards African Americans. And we've been debating online for the last couple of days. Well, it actually happened a few days ago, and I got into a few arguments, not a real argument, but a few arguments with some Native Africans. And one girl had made a post about how we don't know our culture and we don't know where we come from. So I told her, this is ignorant. First of all, wearing a dashiki that was exchanged during the 1960s, because I looked up the history of the Shiki. So this guy, was abroad, and, he learned, the customs in different parts of Africa, West Africa in particular. And I believe that the history of the Shikis come from Ghana, but it expanded to other parts of West Africa as well. So it's not just like one particular ethnicity that wears the Shikis and no one else can wear it. Like, it's other Africans that aren't necessarily a part of the ethnicity that originated in wearing the Shikis. But he decided, okay, we're going to take this to America and have African Americans also wear it because, we need to embrace our culture. And that's basically what it was. So for those who didn't know about that, just look it up. The Shiki literally means shirt, by the way. And, it's, fashion. It used to be for men, but men and women can wear it. It's unisex. Any gender can wear it. It's for anyone that is a part of the African diaspora. But of course, when it comes to anti-Blackness and the stereotype that African Americans don't know their culture, they want to make it like, oh, we ignorant and we just want to be fashionable and we're only wearing it because we saw Beyonce wear it. So what? First of all, people are always going to follow something that they see other people do it. It's life. People see someone doing something and they think, that looks cool. I wonder if it will look cool on me. I should try it. That's what happens. And unfortunately, some people do follow trends and only care about something because it's a trend. But that doesn't mean every African American is thinking the same way. I first looked into it when I heard of Jindina. He's a biracial Nigerian singer, and he's very popular right now. And I also heard about it from Zendaya, who is also Native African. Her dad is African. So, I've actually looked into it from other Native Africans. And, I thought, okay, this is really cool. And I remember the Black is Beautiful movement and how, a lot of people wore it back then. And I thought, it's very beautiful how we're really reviving the era of the Civil Rights Movement, because this never dies. Black Lives Matter is basically a continuation of the Civil Rights Movement. So that was what I was thinking. And, I've been researching about my roots and different countries and different ethnicities in West Africa as well as Central Africa. And I do want to take a DNA test. However, I think it's really expensive, and some people consider it a scam. So I don't know how accurate it is, but one of these days, if I feel like I can shell out like $200, I will try to do it. But, I just want to get an idea of what exactly I am, as far as what ethnicity I am, what tribe I come from. That's all it is. And I got my dashiki from this World Fest. So, I've been wearing it a few times. It's very beautiful. I really feel connected when I wear it. And I just really like the idea that, even African Americans have something traditional to wear that really says, this is who I am. Growing up, I always felt like there's really nothing that I can say this truly belongs to me. Like a t-shirt, nah. A hat, no. But like when I look at dashikis, I feel like, you know, it's not just a part of other parts of diaspora, but it's something that is an identity to African Americans, and it has always been a part of African American culture, whether people like it or not. And don't let people tell you otherwise. But I always felt like, wow, you know, I see Indian women with saris, and I just see all these other women of color with something traditional to wear. You know, I wonder, like, what do we have to wear that's, you know, traditional and that really like shows our culture and our traditions and customs. So that's how I look at it as, but other people don't. And I understand that people feel like there are certain African Americans who only wear dashikis for a trend, but will turn around and say a bunch of anti-black things about Native Africans, especially West Africans. And I am always going in on people who say anti-black stuff about West Africans, because on the video where I was commenting on about Hillary Clinton and the Somalian American girl, people were saying how she's not a real Somalian because she looks West African, she looks African American. And I had commented on the video saying, you know, people look all types of ways, you know, there's no one particular look. And a person had commented like Somalians are beautiful or East Africans are the most beautiful women. And I'm like, because we all know the whole East African versus West African debate and who's more beautiful. And a lot of times when it comes to wide noses, full lips, and darker skin and nappy hair, that is associated with West Africans. And not every West African has that, but that's a stereotype. But, you know, I went in and that person was like, well, you're only saying it's West Africans because you're African American and that's your people. So I thought it was so funny how that person who is East African immediately said, you're African American, so that means your people is West African. Like, I thought that was just so interesting how they immediately associated me with West African. But I understand there are some people who are West African who don't really associate African Americans as one of them. And, you know, I do understand why. But when you are denying someone's culture and saying they aren't real Africans, and part of that reason is because you are anti-black, we do need to talk about it. We need to talk about how a lot of times African Americans are considered the underbellies of the African diaspora. When people think of niggers, they think of African Americans, because people say that Western privilege is a thing and that everyone is bombarded with images of what America is like and how people are exposed to American culture in every part of the world. But we all know when people look at African Americans, they get anti-black tropes about us. So when you see East Asians be anti-black in their own countries and they say, well, we weren't being anti-black, it was just we were mocking American culture. But what American culture are they mocking? Take a wild guess. So with that in mind, I just am so over this whole thing, and that's why so many people just stay away from diaspora awards, because it's just so frustrating. It really is. It's just as intellectually dishonest as talking about colorism. It really is. And it's mostly those who are light-skinned Africans who so-called have good hair trying to come for me and say I have all this privilege and I have all this proximity to whiteness and how they are more black than me. And I feel like that is some projection. What kind of projection is it to say things like, oh, I'm more black than you and you have some internalized anti-blackness and you have self-hatred towards your own people and that's why we're racist towards you because you don't like Africans. And I feel like that's self-projection, because every time I get into an argument, there's always that one person who says, well, I have good hair, you have nappy hair. Every time I come to America, African Americans want to touch my hair because they are envious. And people made justifications as to why people are anti-black to African Americans. They said, well, African Americans are colorist. Native Africans can be colorist. I know so many dark-skinned African Americans who have been called darkies or slurs in their native language to reference their dark skin. Well, people talk about how we have nappy hair. I have friends who go to salons where there are Native Africans working there, and a lot of times they will tell me, they talk about how coarse their hair is, how unmanageable, because apparently African Americans have the stereotype of having unmanageable coarse hair, aka 4C hair, the hair underneath my hair. And I'm not saying it's everyone, but you know how, you know what I mean? How people will sit there and say one thing and then you hear another story. Well, we are called nappy headed. So I don't understand how you can act like that is something that is just unique to Native Africans, that you guys are the only ones to get colorist stereotypes, or you're the only one to be told that your hair is nappy, as if there aren't light-skinned Africans with curly hair that are saying a bunch of anti-black shit about African Americans and their hair. Like, you know, and it goes both ways. And I know African Americans are innocent. And I mention it time and time again. But of course, there's always that one person that has to say it again and try to act like I never said it myself. I can literally say, yes, I know African Americans are not innocent, and I will be the first one to call out someone who talks shit about Native Africans, especially the Nigerian jokes, the Nigerian scammer jokes. I am always calling people out. So, like, when I hear things like that, I am quick to call that out because those are dangerous tropes. They are really dangerous. Just like when African Americans get the trope of being the thug and the ratchet in the ghetto, that is very dangerous as well. The dangerous African American with the gun. That's dangerous as well. But there are also dangerous tropes about Native Africans. And I hear so many people say horrible things about Nigerians. One girl said that if she found out she was Nigerian, she would be so mad. Baby girl, you probably are. Who cares? Like, really? Like, you know, stuff like that. But then you want to act like I never mentioned that to make it look like I am playing a victim when I literally said African Americans aren't innocent. But yet you want to make it like I am playing the victim to get out of admitting that a lot of times you are rape apologists, you are European settler apologists. And you know why? Because you look at us, know the fact that our ancestors were stolen from their land, raped, and stripped of their culture, but all you can say is, you're not innocent, you play victim all the time. How dare you? Really, like, that's so disgusting to me to hear people constantly tell generational rape victims. I'm sorry, but I have to say this. It's basically like African Americans and a lot of black people around the world who have been colonized are generational rape victims, including Native Africans as well. To sit there and say we're playing a victim and we always act like the victims, I am sorry, baby, but we are the victims. Whether you like it or not, we will always be victims, given history and how we are blamed for it, and as if we asked to be taken from our land and to be taken all the way to a land that we didn't even know. We didn't want to be here, hearing jokes like go back to Africa like it's such a bad thing, but that was literally our home, but we were taken from our land. And then to hear people say, well, you're not African enough. You know, it's not like, and it's not like I'm saying things like a light-skinned person would say, you know, I get told I'm not black enough and, you know, I don't see privilege in this. I do see privilege in being an American, but a lot of times that is linked to whiteness. And a lot of times dumb American jokes are often racialized and sexualized. That dumb Americans only apply to POC in America and white women or women in general, but it never really applies to white men. It always applies to everyone else for some reason. But when people think of dumb Americans, they aren't looking at white men. They are looking at fat people. They are looking at black people. They are looking at women. They are looking at people who are part of the LGBT, or everyone that's in between, or everyone that falls into those margins. So I just steer away from the American privilege jokes because I feel it's a way to attack marginalized people and to feel not guilty about it because, oh, they are Americans, so like they are so privileged, but you are always attacking poor Americans. So I just find it such a contradiction. But like I said, I just can't, because, you know, I'm not going to let people strip me of my culture. I'm not going to let people turn me off and say, you know, I'm not African enough and call me a black American when we are called African Americans. It's funny how I make a post that explicitly states African American, but then I have non-African Americans come in and say, well, black Americans. No, baby, African American. You know, I know what you are trying to do there, but yeah. Okay? And then every time we talk about how African Americans oftentimes receive anti-blackness from not just Native Africans, but those who are either Afro-Latinx or Afro-Caribbean or both. And people will say, well, when we came to America, we were bullied as children. Like, they bring up childhood. And then these are people who appropriate a they, and then they say things like, well, it's to assimilate. To assimilate. I'm pretty sure when you are first learning a language, like, I don't know, like, a lot of people don't learn formally, so I can't, like, really decide how people learn a language. But a lot of times when you are learning a language that is not your native language, you aren't going to learn slang. You aren't going to learn regional dialects. You are going to learn standardized English. So I don't know this whole stereotype that Ave is some assimilated American language, because Ave is a distinct dialect. Okay, it is not standardized English. It is not formal English. In fact, it's called improper English, or it's considered such. So what are people talking about when they say Ave is something that they learned because they had to assimilate? I kind of find that bullshit. I'm kind of calling bullshit on that, because I'm pretty sure when people learn, like when people formally learn a language, they're not going to immediately learn slang and regional dialect. And I'm not saying that every person is the same and that there aren't people who learned the language or already knew the language and then decided to pick up on dialects. It happens, because a lot of times when people do come to America, they already have a grasp on the English language because it's taught, in a lot of parts of the world. So, I do understand, but I'm just kind of confused as to how Ave is some assimilated language. And it kind of comes off as saying that Ave is something that is cool. And that kind of sounds like how non-black POC look at black people, how in order to fit in, they have to be cool, while drawing black people under the bus. We don't care when non-African Americans do it as much because you're black. But then when you start to talk about how you're better than us and you talk down to us, but then you want to use Ave to sound tough, no, boo-boo, you're not going to do that. You're not going to talk down to me and talk about how I'm an African American and I'm a dummy and all of this while trying to speak Ave to me. You're not going to do that. Because if I am so beneath you as an African American, you aren't going to speak Ave. And I don't mind non-African Americans speaking Ave. It doesn't make me angry. I'm not going to say, oh, you can't speak Ave, you're not African. No, I'm not that type of person. But I will call it out when it's said by people who want to be anti-black. About African Americans, no. And another thing is, people act as if we are the standard blacks. Maybe the standard blacks of how black you shouldn't be. Maybe we are the ideal black of an example to not be. A lot of people look at us as the bad Africans. A lot of people look at us as niggers, the real niggers. And people think, oh, these are bad, uncouth black people. I've heard people literally say African American women have no class and Native African women are much better. Because, as I said in my blog, it isn't just non-black women who get you a foreign bitch stereotype or the model minority stereotype. No, because there are Native Africans who get the model minority stereotype as well. There are Afro-Caribbeans, there are Afro-Latinx. When they come to America, African Americans are seen as lazier than them, and that they don't do anything, and that they don't work hard. And I am not saying that is a privilege. I am just saying, look at how African Americans are treated by the mainstream in contrast to people who are non-African American. Black people who are non-African American, and see who is looked at as a hard worker and someone that knows what they are about, versus African Americans who are just dumb and lazy and don't amount to anything. Also, I wanted to make an example of how a lot of people bring up childhood and how they were bullied in school and called not African American enough, and how they were told that they weren't good enough and made fun of for their culture and customs. Well, I want to talk about how a couple of times in middle and high school, there were a few girls who weren't African American. They were black. One girl was from England. Actually, I think both girls were from England. They were black Brits. And they were of African descent, Native African descent. And, you know, I thought they were kind of rude to me, like they weren't friendly, and they always looked at me in disdain. But but they would always kiss up to the white kids. They would always try to fit in. They would always try to do things to embarrass me in front of white kids, to say, look how acceptable I am. Look how I am a good black, and look how just dirty and uncouth she is. And they didn't like say all of that, but they gave off vibes. They would try to embarrass me, try to just say things to impress their white friends. And they wouldn't do it to anyone else but white people. Like they wouldn't try to show out in front of other black people, but they would try to like show out for the white kids and try to look cool. And I thought, okay, like, I'm not mad about it. It's not, anything, to harp over, because, we all had internalized anti-blackness. I was internally anti-black as well. So it's not like I'm tripping over it, but it can't be because they sensed I was anti-black, because they themselves were trying to coon up for white people. So I just don't get it. I really don't get it. But hey, it goes both ways. Some is worse than others. I understand. And I do agree with people that we need to acknowledge the fact that we are different, but at the same time, we are the same race. There's no need to have this diasporic wars and to say things that are just really rude, anti-black, ethnocentric, and xenophobic, and just plain dangerous. But that's basically all that I have to say. And just embrace one another. It's no hard feelings. I'm not trying to call people out and say this is everyone, but I just want to like say, if I'm talking about how African Americans are looked upon as these mixed group of people, and you have light-skinned non-African Americans trying to tell you how less black you are, which is kind of projection, because someone must have told them, oh, you're not African enough, you're not a real African, you're light-skinned, you're, terms like half-caste, like just projection, and then try to put that on brown skinned, visibly black, and dark skinned African Americans to try to make them feel above, because it was mostly light skinned people coming from me, people with quote unquote good hair, saying things that were just anti-black, calling us jealous. So, I understand if people have legitimate complaints like, I face colorism. African Americans said that I was ugly, which I have heard before. And I told people I am very disappointed that you would say such a thing about your own people. Why would you say that? Because you're not better than someone just because they aren't African American. You think you're closer to white because you're an American? That's not true. So I just wanted to get that off my chest. Tell me your opinions if you agree or disagree, and we can just talk it out on here. I may respond, but I don't respond to every comment, because for the past 2 weeks, anyone that put anything negative on my channel, something that I just felt like were just lewd or inappropriate, I just flat out deleted it and blocked them, because, I'm not going to deal with it anymore. If you put something nasty on my channel, you're getting removed, and I don't care. There's no reasoning with people. I had to block a couple of people from my post about African Americans being seen as mixed, because, there was no reasoning with them. They wanted to have the last word. So I said, no, you are not getting the last word, and I blocked them. Sorry.